What's up everyone, Alex here. Chained Echoes is finally out, and I have no doubt that many of you are enjoying the game right now, especially since it's also on Game Pass. That said, I encountered some very real challenges trying to get used to the game early on. After all, with its promise of abandoning the traditional experience/leveling system, the biggest question that needed answering was, so what should I focus on now? In this video, I'm going to be diving deep into the various systems in the game to get you a head start and allow you to forecast what to expect, without spoiling the story. You can also use this video as a refresher on how to play the game if you haven't played for a while. And if you don't have the game yet, this is a good way to check out what Chained Echoes will have in store for you. Keep in mind that this video will be chapter marked for your convenience, so feel free to bounce around. If you're ready, class is now officially in session. In this first part of the video, we'll be diving deep into how combat works to better understand this part of the game. And to do that, we'll need to break down the Overdrive system. The game does a really good job of teaching this concept, but I also want to cover the variation of this system when piloting sky armors. The Overdrive gauge consists of a bar that has 3 designated areas, marked with different colors, which are yellow, green, and red in that order. There's also a white cursor that is displayed underneath, and every action moves this to the right. If you think of this cursor like a thermometer that controls the pace of combat, you pretty much get the idea of what's happening here. Essentially, the goal of this thermometer is that you want to stay in the green area as much as you can, because if you reach the red area at the very far right, you'll receive a lot more damage than normal. This mode is called overheating, and you don't want to be in it. Staying in the green activates Overdrive, which sits between yellow and red, and right smack dab in the middle, you will actually increase the damage you deal, as well as receive only half the damage that you'd normally receive. And best of all, skills will only cost half the TP, which is just a great boon. To help you figure out how far your cursor will move, a gray arrow will show up, kind of like a preview each time you highlight an action, giving you a glimpse into the future. But what if you're already in the red? Fortunately, the game gives you several means to move the cursor back to the left. While in Overdrive or Overheat, an icon will pop up to the left of the bar. This icon represents a skill type, and each action has a corresponding skill type. If you use a skill that corresponds with this icon, this will move the cursor towards the left greatly. And for quality of life, any actions that match the current skill type will have its text highlighted in yellow. It's really cool. This icon will also have a countdown and will keep changing over time, so you really have to take advantage of it while it's up. There's other ways to move the cursor to the left, like switching out characters during combat, using Defend, or using an Ultra move. Some characters will have the option to learn skills to move the Overdrive cursor to the left at the cost of TP, and I highly recommend investing in these skills when they become available, especially since it gets really tricky to balance this gauge during later boss fights. The Sky Armor version of the Overdrive gauge functions a bit differently. While in this mode, the Overdrive area in the middle is flanked by 2 Overheat areas to the left and right. Instead of using skills that move the cursor every which way, the direction where your cursor moves is determined by the current Sky Armor's gear setting. You can change your gears once per turn. If your Sky Armor is in Gear 1, commands will move the cursor to the right. If your Sky Armor is in Gear 2, actions will move the cursor to the left. And finally, if your Sky Armor is in Gear 0, the cursor doesn't move at all. What complicates this is that each gear has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's go over each of them quickly. In both Gear 0 and 1, Sky Armors will deal and receive normal damage. The difference here is that you won't be able to use skills while in Gear 0. The upside of Gear 0 is that utilizing attack, defend, or items will restore a huge amount of TP on top of the usual TP you get. In Gear 2, Sky Armors will deal and receive more damage. Skills will also cost more TP. To put it in another way, I consider Gear 0 as the quote-unquote TP regeneration gear, followed by Gear 1, which I consider the vanilla gear, and Gear 2, which I then call Berserk mode. Keep in mind that attacks from enemies will still move the cursor to the right, so my advice is to have most of your sky armors set at Gear 2 at the start of battle, and shifting a sky armor to Gear 0 or 1 as enemies drop off. Your goal in this case is to counteract the cursor movement to the right by having sky armors at Gear 2, which helps move the cursor to the left in the early moments of combat. From time to time, you'll encounter enemies that have no elemental weaknesses. Fortunately, you can apply debuffs that will make these enemies more susceptible to specific elements. And there's 4 specific status effects that you have to pay attention to. Dry, which makes the enemy susceptible to water. Heavy, which makes them susceptible to earth. Oil, which makes them susceptible to fire. And wet, which makes them susceptible to wind. Since the battles in Chained Echoes isn't going to be like much of your experience from other JRPGs, one piece of advice that I want to give you is to not be afraid to experiment during battle. This might sound strange to hear in a tip video, but I only mention this because there are several ways that Chained Echoes eases up the feeling of loss during combat. For example, you replenish your HP and TP after every battle, so you don't have to worry about spending precious resources to replenish everyone's health and TP. Also, your Ultra Move gauge carries over from battle to battle, so you could just raise your Ultra Move on an easier enemy and unleash it at a powerful upcoming boss as your opening salvo. If you lose, you're given the option to retry battles. This will allow you to go to your menu so that you can change your builds and party composition. If you still can't beat your enemies, you still have a few options. If you're not fighting a boss, you can just run away from enemies, including rare monster hunts. And worst comes to worst, you can lower the difficulty of the game using the options sliders. And on that note, are you finding the game too difficult or too easy? Then adjust these difficulty sliders, which can be found in the Accessibility tab. The Overdrive size adjusts the size of the Overdrive gauge, making it harder or easier to activate Overdrive. You can also raise or lower the enemy stats, and if you set it to low, keep in mind that that'll make enemies easier. And last but certainly not least is the slider for enemy aggression. Another word that I'd use instead of this term is enemy awareness. Your enemies are pretty aware, and if you have any characters that are close to death, you'll notice that enemies will hone in and target on that specific character until they die. That's normal. Next, let's talk about progression. While Chained Echoes does away with the traditional experience point / leveling system, there are still plenty of benefits to engage and win battles, which come in the form of SP and loot. Loot is pretty straightforward. These are drops you can sell to stores that can earn you tons of money. This is separate from materials and other things, so just sell all of your loot when you get to shops. Additionally, selling loot will unlock more deals, which can net you a whole bunch of items and equipment, so keep selling them loots. The SP you earn after winning battles, on the other hand, actually does 2 things. For one, the SP you learn is added to each individual character's SP pool. This SP pool can be used to level up any active or passive skills. Keep in mind that you cannot use your SP pool to partially fill a skill's SP meter. You're going to have to pay the full cost of leveling up, or not at all. On top of the SP pool, the SP you earn is applied to any skill you have currently equipped on your character. For example, if you earn 2 SP from battle, both your SP pool and all of the skills your characters currently have equipped will receive 2 SP. That aside, you might find that earning SP to be a slow way of making your characters more powerful. This is where buying new weapons and armor and engaging with the game's crafting system comes into play. Buying new weapons and armor ensures that you're ready to face any tough challenges ahead, and if you're an RPG veteran, then you already know to do this on the regular. but it's even more important in Chained Echoes as this greatly enhances your offensive and defensive power. If you're unable to buy new pieces of equipment, however, you should consider upgrading your existing gear to improve their stats and allow you to socket more powerful crystals onto them. Think of crystals as ways to further enhance the stats of your weapons and armor. Speaking of, in order to increase the potency of your crystals, you'll have to combine the same type of crystals with another. The purity stat determines whether or not a crystal could be utilized in future combinations, so make sure to keep an eye out for this. Also, you'll notice that certain crystals have asterisks on them. What this means is that these crystals can only be used as base crystals, which is this slot right here. Making your character more powerful seems easy enough, but what about learning new skills? After specific boss battles in the main story, you'll earn grimoire shards to use to unlock either active or passive abilities or stat boosts. Keep in mind that unlocking certain active and passive skills also gives you stat boosts. You'll also earn grimoire shards at various intervals after unlocking and linking together a set number of rewards on the reward board. The reward board is particularly handy whenever you want to earn some extra money or items, as well as give you an idea of what you can stumble upon in a particular area. So check back often, especially when you arrive at a new location. But these aren't the only ways to learn new skills. Scattered about are these Heroes of Leonar statues, which will allow you to equip classes at the cost of a sacred water and winning a special battle. You'll earn sacred waters through milestones in the reward board, or just by exploring the world, so keep an eye out for treasure chests during your explorations. Equipping these classes will let you equip 2 active and passive skills, as well as greatly improve your stats. Fully learning a class's active and passive skills will allow you to equip these without equipping the class itself, so there's a good bit of grinding to be had if you want to be able to fully learn these. Each character has 2 class-specific active and passive skill slots. I want to point out that you can utilize these slots for your character's own active and passive skills. That said, you can only equip class-specific active and passive skills in these special slots. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about the stats. Attack represents your physical damage in the game, whereas defense represents your physical defense. Magic represents your magical damage, and mind actually affects 2 stats, which is your magical defense and healing potency. Agility determines your turn order, and crit percentage is, I think, self-explanatory. And that, my friends, is my beginner's guide to Chained Echoes. If there are still topics that are a bit unclear despite me going over it, please feel free to use the chapter markers for your convenience. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to post it in the comments below, and I or members of the community will answer them to the best of our abilities. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.